Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Brain Lady Speaks podcast. So excited to have everyone here listening, whether you are listening in your mobile office or on your headphones, whichever it is, your ear pods, whichever it is, welcome and thank you. I am honored that you have spent the time here with myself and my guest for today. We have a really, really good topic for today, and it's all about relationships. At the end of the day, every single thing in our life is based on a relationship, whether it's a relationship with a significant other, our neighbors, or even our relationship with ourself. It's all relationships. So when I get the opportunity to chat with someone who's passionate about relationships as I am very, very happy. And so we are here today. We are joined by Dr. Dan Sneider. Dr. Dan, welcome to the Brain Lady Speaks podcast.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I'm really looking forward to our conversation today.
Absolutely. It'll be a fun one, I'm sure. Let me, for the audience, I'm going to kind of read your professional bio so they get a little bit of your background, and then we'll ask what really led you into this field. But first, let's start with just your general bio. And Dr. Dan is all about relationships, as I mentioned, and relationships can be hard. He says when the spark fades and every conversation feels like you're just walking on eggshells. Yes, I may or may not have been there one time or two in my life. It's easy to drift apart. And that's where today's guest, Dr. Dan Sneider, comes in. He's a licensed couples therapist, educator, and creator of what he calls the Intimacy Shift, which is a blueprint for moving from conflict to lasting connection. This is a 12-week program that transforms couples' relationships by rebuilding trust, improving communication, and rediscovering real intimacy. With personal experience and over a decade of professional expertise helping hundreds of couples, Dr. Dan knows what it takes to shift from conflict to connection and bring the spark back for good. So we're going to learn about how to develop or cause real change in our relationships. And here to share that information is Dr. Dan Sneider. Once again, Dr. Dan, thank you for being on the Brain Lady Speak show.
Yeah, I love your topic. I loved listening to your past episodes. And yeah, our brain, our hearts, and our bodies are all connected inside of ourselves and with our loved ones. So,
Yeah.
talking about relationships is very much a passion for me, and I'm looking forward to getting into it.
Awesome. And you know what? With that in mind, one of the first questions I always like to ask my guests is before we get into just the real content, like what drove you or interested you in this particular field of work? Like obviously being a
Mhm.
therapist, certain people are drawn to that, but then you have this niche within that
Mhm.
therapy umbrella. Like what drove you or I should say attracted you or led you into this particular course in your life?
Yeah. So, like all of us, right? It's a good story. There's a long version and a short version, but some of the highlights for me really start in my early childhood. And like you mentioned, all of us wired for connection. We have all these relationships in our lives, and we learn so much at an early age about what's safe, who is safe, what feels good, what doesn't, and how to survive those early years. And so in my early years, I came from household that looked really wonderful from the outside and had quite a bit of dysfunction on the inside. And I'm
Well,
sure many
been
of your
there.
listeners are nodding, right? Julie's got her hand raised. And so I learned from an early age, and we can talk more about attachment science and how that affects the brain and development. But I developed an avoidant attachment style early in life. I learned because of that dysfunction in the household that I really had to take care of my own emotional needs in order to survive, in order to get through. And I did survive, I did get through, but learned some lessons that really negatively affected my ability to have loving, safe, trusting relationships. And so I first started going to therapy when I was a teenager. And that was such a safe place. I had this wonderful therapist. And at that point, really discovered that all of these feelings that I was having, uh, I could learn from them, I could work through them with somebody else, and that this was a way for me to connect with myself and also potentially with other people. So, later on in my teenage years, when I went to college and was still so interested in people and figuring myself out, psychology was a natural trend.
Yeah.
And I very much identify as a wounded healer myself. I'm not perfect. I don't have it all figured out. And as I grew up, had different relationships, I wanted to learn for myself how to have healthy, safe, trusting relationships and also to help other people along the way with what I was learning. And so as I got married, had kids and a family, I started getting into couples counseling. I was a
Mm.
social worker already, had been working with families, with teenagers, with adults. But in my own marriage, a lot of the ghosts, traumas from my past, were playing
Sure.
out, right? I didn't have it all figured out. I
Yeah.
wished that I did, but I didn't. And so I really got interested then in working with couples and learning how to help couples through things that I was going through. And then from there, right, that's continued more than 10 years later, still being
Yeah.
fascinated by couples counseling and relationships. And it's led into this work that I do now and this program I created called The Intimacy Shift.
I love that. And I think you hit on something really, really important. And I want the listeners to grab onto that because I love the fact that we're getting the world in general or society in general is getting more and more open to being accepting of therapy. I know when I
Mm.
was back in a teen, now I'm 60. So we're going back. If you, I know I don't look a day over 30, but anyways, uh, the little, that's my psychology, right? But back in the day for me, you didn't, if you were brave enough to seek out a therapist or some additional assistance with your thoughts, you certainly didn't tell anybody about it. So I love the fact that you embraced it and that you had a really good experience. And I want everybody listening to really hear the message of that, that if you are in a culture currently, or you're in a place currently where maybe you're like, oh, I kind of feel like I'd like to talk to somebody, but I don't know, what are people going to think? Try to let go of all of
Mm.
that fear about doing it, because it can be so helpful to be able to discover within yourself that, guess what, you're not strange, there's nothing wrong with you. These
Mhm.
are thoughts that you just need help working through, or assistance
Yeah.
understanding them. So I applaud you for being able to step in that in the teen years, and I think that's especially helpful. I just was listening to a news report this morning on AI therapy, and I'm like, that's going to be a whole nother podcast.
Yeah. Oh, and it should be because that is a fascinating subject. So, yes.
Hmm.
And
Definitely
many of the
pros and
couples
cons.
that I work with will tell me that they talked something through with AI, in between
Yeah,
sessions, and in some ways it can be really helpful. I love, asking AI a variety of questions, but
yeah,
it is not the same thing as talking with a licensed professional for
yeah.
many reasons.
Yeah,
Yes.
and that's one of the points that they were highlighting, right? It has its place. I think it can be
Mhm.
an assist, but there's a certain thing about our mirror neurons as human beings and our ability to empathetically connect to another person, or even just problem solve in our brain while we're listening to them speak, that AI, not that it can't get there someday, just that it's not there yet. So that's the scary side. But so if you're listening, we'll do another pod at some point in time on
Great,
that
great.
subject. Maybe we'll have DrDan back and get his feelings. So
Sure,
that's
yeah.
that's great. It's nice to hear your background, and hear how, I'm sure, as you were going through your journey and helping other people, what you were able to combine your own personal experience with the experience of working with other couples into creating this program that you mentioned.
Exactly. Yeah, it's a mix of all the best research and tools and practices that truly work when we use them. I'm very big on tools and practices. You mentioned this idea of therapy, like there being a taboo, and people who haven't been to therapy have an idea of what it is. And more, the research is showing that the best kinds of therapy involves a genuine connection between the therapist and the client, and tools and practices to be used in between sessions. It's not all
Mhm.
talking about our feelings and going into our childhood. There really is a behavior change part of it where we
Yeah.
do need to actively do some things differently to see those
Yeah.
changes in our life. And so in this program, it's a mix of both going through the research, understanding how we got to where we are, but then
Mhm.
also what do we do about it here in the present moment? What can we really put into place?
Yeah.
And my experiences are very much a part of that because, like I said, not perfect, did not have it all figured out. And a lot of, what I've come to learn has been through trial and error and the learning that I did in school, but the thousands of hours that I've spent working with real life couples and in my own
Yeah.
life, really figuring out what's most effective, and being in a male body and male, cultural messages my whole life. Many of the couples that I work with are male and female bodied, and that does come with very different backgrounds, very different approaches to intimacy, emotional intimacy, and physical intimacy. And all of that is a part of these relationships that we're trying to find connection within.
Yeah, absolutely. And when you coming from the brain standpoint, there's the brains are different, right? If the in the male female or the XY and the XX chromosomes, it causes a difference in the average brain. It
Mhm.
does cause a difference in the wiring, and that wiring shifts the perspective slightly and the communication styles, which that's one of the questions that we were going to, or one of the things that we were going to talk about, is that we all know that communication relationships is so incredibly important. And understanding, when you kind of begin to understand, like I always, when I do the topic on male female brain, I always show the the picture of a massive freeway interchange, on ramps, off ramps, all this stuff. And every car, I say, is a cognitive thought. And this is a woman's brain. And then I show this nice, quiet 2-lane country road. And I'm like, that's the XY. So
Mhm.
literally, because the corpus callosum in the brain, on average, right? This is,
Mhm.
I'm not putting a blanket call out there, but on average, it's different in if the Y chromosome is present. And so it changes the way that you and I would communicate. And because communication is so important, but we're communicating on two different levels, what are some practical and actionable tools that you give people to help um, build this intimacy or this connection
Mhm.
between them when sometimes they're almost speaking two different languages?
Yes, yes. So my favorite tool is a feelings wheel. So anybody can remember that, write it down, Google it, search it. But there are these wonderful available visuals. Picture a wheel, right? So at the center, right in the hub, you're going to have your kind of base level emotions: happy, sad, angry, right? And then moving outward from the hub on those spokes are more detailed, more nuanced emotions. And so I love this as a visual. And I can't tell you the number of times I've used it in my own life or brought it out into sessions, because we don't always know how we feel if we don't have a word for it, especially.
Hmm.
And there are incredible, when we talk about the brain, there are incredible studies showing that different specific feeling words evoke different messages in our brain. Different parts of our
Hmm.
brain light up, whether we are feeling disrespected or frustrated, envious or tired, right? And using the
Hmm.
different word changes the cascade of neurochemicals and how our bodies respond. And so when you talk about that quiet, 2-lane country road, right, where I can identify I'm hungry, tired, mad, sad, happy, in order to have a more busy thoroughfare in my brain and body, I actually need new words, more words, and practice using them. So
Yeah.
I encourage parents, because this is great for kids, boys,
Mhm.
girls, any kind of kids you have, and men and women as adults. But I'm a man,
Mhm.
and I love this tool. I don't feel bad when I need to use
Right.
my feelings wheel. But that's how we get practice. I have a visual chart. I have a list of words, and it helps me to clarify. Oh, okay. So I was frustrated, but I was also disappointed or feeling let down, and when I
Mhm.
can get underneath the frustrated to that more nuanced feeling of disappointed, oh, the relief that I feel, and my body can relax because
Mhm.
I've really identified what was going on. And it changes the conversation in that household between kids and parents, between romantic partners, and then we can connect.
Yeah. Yeah, I like that. And another reason why a tool like that is so powerful, and I've used them in the feelings wheel and studied it a lot in my certifications, and it's one of the things that a lot of our emotions are right brain things, right? They're connected to the right hemisphere of the brain is connected more strongly to the limbic system, and the limbic system is that home of emotion. And the right side of the brain doesn't have words on it. The right side of the brain has the pictures. So it is honestly difficult sometimes to go, okay, how does this emotion connect to a word? The emotion that might be strong on the right side connect to a word, and the words are all housed on the left side of the brain. So
Mm.
having a visual, especially with individuals that perhaps it's an introverted man that doesn't speak a lot, or even an introverted woman, an introverted child, or a neurodivergent individual who has a really hard time articulating that, to be able to have a visual in front of them that they can literally like point to and go, oh, wait a minute, this is what really is. I thought I was angry, but in reality, what's behind that is this completely different feeling, insecurity or sadness or whatever. It just, that's the way
Mhm.
it was displayed or acted out. And in relationships, boy, that makes a huge difference. Knowing, no, it's not that I wasn't, that I'm angry. I'm hurt that I wasn't hurt, or something along that line. It makes that communication so much better. So that's a great tool. That's a great tip. Now, you talked about, or you have mentioned that you have your personal as an individual values are growth and gratitude. And I love that. There's so much connected to gratitude and positive brain chemistry, right? It's
Mhm.
individuals who have gratitude are much more connected to joy. How did you personally discover or come to making those your personal values, and how do they show up in the work that you do with individuals that you coach and consult with?
Yeah. So my one of my favorite speakers, writers, people is Dr. Brene Brown, who, if
Mhm.
people listening haven't heard of or checked out, she's wonderful. But in one of her books, she had a values exercise where, again, having a list of all the values in front of you. And again, something you can Google and look up, hundreds, of values, words, and statements. But the idea with the exercise is you want to narrow down the list to the values that most resonate for you, and keep narrowing down the list and asking yourself, why this value over that one? Why this over the other? And it's exercise in learning about yourself and clarifying by narrowing down what's most important to you. So, a great tool for personal reflection or to use with a partner, and it can spark a really wonderful, deep, rich conversation about
Mhm.
who you are, why you do the things that you do each day. And for me, those two values just completely resonate and what I want to embody in the world. So, that growth mindset, which again, lots of research and wonderful writing, starting with Carol Dweck, and the
Mhm.
idea that, that uh, busy highway system that the average female brain might have, or the quiet country road that a male brain might have, those are not necessarily fixed. You're not predestined that that is the limit of what your brain can do. Our brains are these incredible things if you believe that you have the ability to grow and to change and learn, which I very much do. Because again, from my story, growing up where I grew up, my options were I can stay this really angry, young man who was lonely, depressed, and making not so great choices in life and relationships. Or I could work hard at different things to feel different, to have better relationships, and to feel more connected with the world. And so when I wake up in the morning, some days still feeling depressed or anxious or disconnected, I have a choice and I lean towards growth and what my possibilities are. And I want that for other people too. And then the gratitude part fits in wonderfully with that because I can, again, with that choice, feel grateful for all the wonderful gifts that I have, and I can notice the good around me. Or, as I have spent other days, pointing out what's wrong with everybody around me, what's not right, why the world isn't fair. And those are not fun days. It's not how I want to live. And so I keep those values front and center to create the connections, the relationships in the world that I want to have.
Yeah, I call them touchstones. When you have your values clear, and I do a lot of business coaching and I do a lot of executive coaching and training for leaders. And when the values are clear, then when you're faced with a really difficult decision, or you're going through something that is challenging and providing a struggle in your life, you just have those values there in front of you, and you ask yourself, how do I maneuver my way through this challenge, keeping in mind those values, using that as a touchstone, right? If I always want to be grateful, then my next step or my next action is going to connect to that value. And that sometimes is very helpful in doing that. We talk about at Your Best Mind, we teach the, mindfulness practice in the morning and the evenings and how important that is. And in the evening reflections, it's kind of just brain dumping and thinking, okay, how did my day go? And whatever you're working on, and if you're working on values or you're working on aligning your life with values, that's a great time to go, okay, how well did my day go today? And how closely connected was I to that? And from your perspective, or the perspective of what we're talking about today on the show, is how well did it fit into the relationship that I'm working to improve with this significant person in my life? So I like that. I think we get so busy in the day to day that a simple redirect or refocus, we miss it because our days get too complicated. So you talked about your program. You mentioned it. It's called the intimacy shift. So tell me, what are some common shifts that you and your clients have experienced with applying what you teach? And why is this such an important issue for really everyone, but really in the close personal relationships?
Right. So I generally called it the intimacy shift because there are these different points in relationship. Guaranteed, if you are with someone long enough, there will be changes and shifts to how you connect. And that can be emotional intimacy, trust, friendship, closeness. It can be physical intimacy, sex, romance, and passion. And a few of the most common shifts that I'll see in people that I work with are going from dating separate households to now cohabitating in the same house. That's a big shift and change. Adding children to that dynamic, another big shift and change. And then on the other end of children, that empty nest sensation of, okay, we raised the kids, we had so much purpose, and again, so busy. And then now it's the two of us, and things feel a lot different than they did before. And so those are
Mhm.
a few general places where we see big shifts in intimacy, but there are other places along the way where different changes can happen. And I work with couples who are experiencing disconnection or conflict in all of those areas, whether there's been infidelity, cheating, broken trust and betrayal, to all the things that every couple really has to navigate at some point or another: family planning, sex, finances. And what I love about the way that I design the program is, like I mentioned earlier, it blends all of this great research and science where we will talk about our attachment styles. We will use emotionally focused therapy techniques to map out our patterns of how conflict happens in our relationship. But we also want individual systems for each couple so that over the 12 weeks that we're meeting, that they have clear objectives and goals that we can work towards, so that from beginning to middle to end, we can see changes for that specific couple, what they need the most help on addressing. So it has something for everybody, but is also individually tailored to that particular relationship's needs.
I like that, and I like the fact that it's a growth on both. It's not just the growth in the relationship, it's the personal growth that a person is going to go through when they're, because in order to fix, it takes two to tango, as they say.
Mhm.
And you can always point the finger at somebody else, but what's that saying? There's always a few fingers pointing back at you when you do that. So it's a growth on both sides. And the fact that you're able to, you know, help to cause that, individualize this program, even though it's a general program, you're able to individualize it for the participants. That's
Exactly. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, because it's not all pre-recorded, right? Over the 12 weeks, there are weekly hour-long sessions. There are group sessions. I'm teaching and talking and explaining, but can receive questions in real time and can address specific issues for specific participants that are meeting in the group. So you do get that feedback from me. And then in between those weekly hour-long sessions, there's homework, there's practice that happens in between. And you're absolutely right. When we learn specifically, instead of using you language, right, pointing the finger at you,
Mhm,
trying to use
mhm.
I language, identifying
Yeah,
how I'm feeling and
yeah,
expressing it in a way that we can constructively talk about what's going on.
yeah.
And it's really been a wonderful program for me, just as an educator and getting to connect with different people, but also the changes that I've gotten to see in the people in the program has just been fantastic. Couples that are recovering from, like I mentioned, infidelity or betrayal, but wanting to stay
Mhm,
together,
mhm.
wanting to work through that situation. Couples
Yeah.
that may not have had sex in months or years. Couples that are having knockdown, drag out fights over finances and can't seem to get on the same page, being able to talk to each other in healthy ways.
Mhm. That's so important, because again, communication is the foundation, and if you don't have good communication, then that just, you can't break down the barriers. So
Mhm.
that leads to one last question. You kind of touched on it, because when you really talk about intimacy in relationships, and that's, I'm talking about a relationship with a significant other, um you definitely talk about that physical connection, and you mentioned it, ones that perhaps have not been able to have that physical connection through sex is something that has affected people. So how do you help couples that are struggling with maybe a mismatched desire or challenges, because perhaps there was infidelity and so now there's lack of trust, and that that is puts up a very big wall. Like how does this program, um or you yourself, when people are working with you as an individual, how do you work through that?
Yeah. So the first thing that I want to address with any couple is, how can we be on the same team? So instead
Mhm.
of me versus you or scorekeeping or blaming, what can we both agree on? And I have yet to find a relationship where the two people couldn't agree, well, we want to feel more close. We want to feel more connected. So,
Mhm.
okay, we can agree on that. And from that place of agreement, now we can address how to get there. So instead of talking about all the problems, all the things that have gone wrong, we're going to start with that love, that desire for closeness, and build from there. And all of the couples who at first say they have a mismatched desire, because I do hear that often. That's very
Mhm.
common, especially in male female relationships or as aging or as hormones change. That I do hear that often. And my
Mhm.
first question is, tell me about when you do connect or when you have tried to have sex or the last time you had sex. Tell me about what that felt like. What happened then? And there is more to it than a
Mhm.
mismatched desire. There's often many missing pieces of
Yeah.
one or both people feeling seen, feeling cared about, feeling like the setup before that connection happened in a way that they could actually, in their body, feel safe to connect. So we spend a lot of time talking about the setup, not just, okay, how do we be physically intimate, but how
Mhm.
is that relationship going the rest of the time? How
Yeah.
well seen is each person? And again, going back to the brain and the body, we regulate together as two people. So if we're in the house and we are dysregulated, or one person is stressed and the other person is also stressed,
Mhm.
that's not a recipe for grounded connection. And so we have to
Yeah.
address that so we can be in our bodies regulated and safe to connect. So there's a
Yeah.
lot there, but that's a few of the ways that I approach it and think about it.
Yeah. And I think that's so important, right? Because it's never the thing. It's about all the stuff around the thing.
Mhm.
Right?
Yeah.
It's
Yeah. The
not
tip
about
of
what
the
he
iceberg
said or
versus
yeah,
everything
or she
underneath.
exactly, exactly. There's always a lot. And sometimes it goes really deep and really historic. You have the body keeps score, Dr. Van de Kolk, like all the work he did, like that's that trauma. It could be something that isn't anywhere even connected to
Mhm.
your individual partner that you're with at the moment, but it still is causing friction there. So there's so much more in that big picture. And when both partners understand that, they don't have to understand all the trauma. They don't have to unpack all of that, but just understanding it, then it doesn't, they don't always take that, offense to it or something
Mhm.
that causes a challenge. So well,
Exactly.
Doctor, this has been such a great conversation to have, and I love this program that you have. And if people want to reach out to you, they can find you at DrDan and growthandgratitudetherapy.com. But if they're interested, or I should say, and if they are interested in this, we keep popping up that the intimacyshift.com. So if you're listening and you're not watching this on YouTube, you're not seeing the video, you can go to theintimacyshift.com. And that actually he has there a free 12-page guide on the initial steps to his process. So you get kind of like a little taste to know whether or not this might be a 12-week program. And I think we were talking before we started recording. You said you do this about 3 times a year. So
Mhm.
they'll if you want to get in, but it's not the right time of year, just sign up and connect with him, and he'll get you information on when the next one comes around. Well, Dr. Dan, thank you very much for this conversation. I think these are conversations that are so important to have, where the more and more we can improve the relationships that we have and the connection that we have to other people, the better, the happier we're going to be. And then that can just have this snowball or this mushroom effect to affect other people. So thank you very much for being with us today.
Oh, my pleasure. Yeah, love the conversation and check out all of, Julie's wonderful episodes because there is so much good information I've been enjoying.
Oh, thank you so much, Dr. Dan. I appreciate that. And on that note, if you want to find me anywhere, pretty much all the social pages, Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook, wherever is your platform of choice. TikTok, we have quite a large exposure on TikTok. I am Brain Lady Julie everywhere. So you can pretty much find me, and you can just type in Brain Lady Julie online and you'll probably find lots of different ways to connect. So reach out and connect with us. Message me. I'd love to interact. If you have a thought, or you're like, oh, I loved this conversation, I wish you would go into it deeper. Or you want, you've read a book, or you've seen something that you want me to talk about, send us an email. Shoot us an email to info@brainladyspeaker.com and put in the subject box, idea for the podcast or interview for the podcast. Or maybe you are an expert in your field that's connected to really anything connected to the brain, and basically everything's connected to the brain because the brains run the world. So on that note, just reach out to us and let us know, and we'll get back with you. My speaker liaison and podcast producer is Kelli, Kelli, at brainladyspeaker.com. So you can always reach out there to her. And she is in the background right now, popping those things up for me to help me stay connected. And we also have a wonderful personality assessment. So on that topic of communication, the brain personality assessment at brainpersonalityassessment.com, or this little QR code here, is it's a 37-page report that you get. And a lot of it has to do with understanding your natural brain DNA code, as well as understanding others. And then how do you bridge, right? How do you make that critical connection by understanding people and their individual personalities? So with that, I'm going to let everybody go today. I want to thank everyone for spending the time with us. We were honored to have you here. Check out the assessment, check out DrDan's program there, get his 12 tips download. And for the rest of the day, I want you to just go out there, take a nice deep breath of fresh air wherever you're at, go out and simply enjoy every moment. Until next time.